Futures trading involves risk and is not suitable for all investors. Content provided in this segment is meant for educational purposes and is not a solicitation to buy or sell commodities.
Hello and welcome to the October 30th edition of Basis Loaded with Joe Schmit. I am Joe Schmit. This episode, as always, is produced by Paige Driscoll. And as I mentioned, it is the day before Halloween, which, of course, anybody who watched yesterday's Tech Talk is well aware of. They're certainly celebrating the holiday spirit there. This episode also falls 2 days after the sports equinox, where we have professional baseball, basketball, football, and hockey all on the same day. When you combine those two factors with the unbelievable gorgeous weather we're having in the Chicagoland area, what better way to celebrate than with the latest from the NDPSR report? We'll start this week with butter. Butter coming in at $262.97. That is a -1 to the CME 1 week average of $264.10. So we traded 15 loads at the CME last week. That weekly average of $264.10 was the low week at the CME. Typically, you would expect positive basis on the low week of a move, especially after coming off substantially higher levels. However, here we have negative basis once again in butter. At that discounted level, however, the manufacturer was able to move north of 5.5 million pounds. So there's a win there. All you have to do is look for the positive, and volume certainly one of them. Manufacturer able to move almost 2 million pounds over our expected 3.5 million level by discounting just 1 penny. So I guess if the goal was to stay clear, it was a nice week for the manufacturer. Up next is the big surprise in this week's report, and we will start with the block cheese coming in at $204.73. That's a +12 to the CME 1 week average of $192.40. +12. I thought that was incredibly large basis, but you'll see later in this report that it is not the biggest surprise this week. +12 outsized basis. The fact that we're able to still maintain levels above $2 with the CME averaging, the benchmark CME averaging $192.40. Certainly impressive and possibly an indication that manufacturers were able to get a lot of export business done at a fixed price when cheese was at a substantially higher level. However, the spot sales, if we did sell a lot via the export market, weekly contracts and spots are on the low end because this week's total volume only 11.3 million pounds. So a little bit below our expected level, but super outsized basis. I mean, that's almost 4 times our expected basis this week, coming in a +12. And the good news doesn't stop there for the manufacturer, because this week's barrel number, 207.49. That's a +16, 16-cent positive basis in the barrel. The CME 2-week average was $191.30. So that was the low 2-week average at the CME, and you would expect positive basis at the low end of the range, and I guess +16 certainly qualifies there. And a little bit different than the story in the blocks, because even at that outsized basis level, manufacturers still able to move north of 13.6 million pounds. So big volume now that the barrel has come off of its lofty levels. And even with the CME wallowing in the low 90s, we're still unable to get either cheese contract on the NDPSR underneath 204. Certainly impressive, and possibly we still have some residual demand. Those folks that missed it on the way up are certainly not going to miss it twice, and it looks like they're feeling the cooler as prices come back to reality in cheese. Up next is whey, 56.47, which is a -3.5 to the CME 1 week average of 60. We traded 13 loads on the CME last week. And then, of course, in whey, we're always talking about this week's price in relation to prior week's NDPSR. So here we're looking at the October 12th number, and this is the first time in a long time that the sales price for the current week is below the prior week's NDPSR. So the manufacturer had to discount below prior week's NDPSR of 56.61 in order to move weight this week, and move weight they did, north of 7 million pounds, got a lot of sales. But you'll remember on last week's report, I was talking about how the whey had been stair-stepping up in 2-week increments. We were expecting another push higher based on this elevated benchmark of 56.61, but that did not come to fruition. Prices under a little bit of pressure here at that level, and the NDPSR unable to post an increase over prior week's NDPSR level, and that is the first time in a long time that has occurred, and could be a sign that maybe we're seeing a little bit of consolidation in spot whey sales in the real world. And then lastly, non-fat, 135.35. That's a flat basis to the CME 1-week average of 135.40. We traded 32 loads at the CME in the non-fat market, and that is our spot market leader for the week. However, all that weight at the CME didn't add up to a lot here on the NDPSR. As you see, total sales just a little bit north of 13.8 million, and probably disappointment in volume. However, in price, this is parity, flat basis. You have to call that a win for the manufacturer and non-fat compared to what we have been running in recent weeks. So this is week 4 of 4 for the October pricing cycle, and October expires today with a class 3 of 22.85 and a class 4 of 20.90. If you carry current CME equivalents, and I'm using a cheese number below 204 for my November calculation, we'll see if that happens. But if you use current CME equivalents plus normal basis, I'm getting a 5-week November class 3 of 20.50, and wait for it, November class 4, 20.50. So we have parity in class 3, class 4 for November if all things hold steady at the CME. We'll see what they have in store for us in the weeks to come. Until then, I'm Joe on behalf of Paige and the entire EverAg Insights team. Thanks. Have a great Halloween. Bye.